Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies to the people who have my back. I'll have to face this way. This debate session is addressing the question of understanding innovation, how innovations happen, in a general context, and right at the end we will try and bring it home to education. But the idea of the first day is to talk about innovation in general and see what lessons there are for education. I have four panelists in front of me. On my immediate right, Dr. Chung from Korea. Next to him, Professor Gupta from India. Coming round the table, someone who is arrived here a bit breathless because he works for the BRAC organization, and his boss, of course, received the major prize earlier this morning. So there's a certain amount of celebration going on within the BRAC representation. Asif SALEH from BRAC in Bangladesh. And finally, but by no means least, Marc PRENSKY from the United States. So those are our protagonists today. We are going to try to organize this as a discussion and in which we will be encouraging people to interrupt and to contribute rather less formally than normal. We will address four questions. At the end of each question, I will turn to the audience for one or two very quick observations, and then I will try and engage the audience by occasionally asking you to vote on issues which are being discussed in the panel. The four questions we're going to discuss, each of them rather briefly, is: if we are to find ways of encouraging innovation, we first have to understand it. So where do good ideas come from? Big question. The second one is, there's often a gap between ideas and their implementation as innovations and change. What can we do about that gap? Can we help it? Can we help close it? Thirdly, with any innovation, there is, of course, a risk of failure. And so how does our attitude, our organization, our country, our government, our society's attitude to failure impact upon innovation? And finally, from each of the panelists, an opportunity to make a single point that they'd like to carry forward to the debate on education, lessons from innovation more widely. So let me turn straight away to the first question. Essentially, are good ideas the result of a single individual's, what you might call, eureka moment, like Archimedes, who is supposed to have leapt out of his bath and discovered the whole way of measuring volume by the amount of water he displaced, and run down the street without any clothes on shouting eureka? Is it that sort of process, or is it much more a result of careful, long-term development work, often by a team of people rather than individuals? Do most good ideas and innovations come from that environment or from the eureka moment? So let me start by moving straight to Marc to start the conversation.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you for listening. Some of you may be aware there's a book by my friend Stephen Johnson called Where Do Good Ideas Come From?, in which he argues for essentially the group effect of ideas. But I'm going to take the other perspective here, and I'm going to say that what comes from individuals is vision. And that typically, whether you see it in the arts, whether you see it in a political movement, whether you see it in the prize that was just awarded, it is often one person's vision that then gets shared and taken on by other people, and that is maintained over a period of time that I think leads to some of the best ideas. And there's a reason we talk about Gandhi, and there's a reason we talk about Steve Jobs, and there's a reason we talk about these people. They didn't do everything themselves, but without their vision, I don't think we would get the kinds of innovation that we have gotten.
Well, I have a little bit different idea on the source of ideas. Inventors and geniuses are very often portrayed in the media as an off-balance or weird people who work alone or who don't need extensive schooling or whose idea comes to them instantly in a flash or who don't quite follow the social rules. They are known as isolated, independent inventors who seldom interact with other people. A well-known example of that is Dr. Frankenstein. But he is fictional. In reality, he does not exist. As we see in the history of science, good ideas come from human interactions rather than from inspirations in isolation. Ideas are the layers of existing knowledge. Over the last 3 decades, 25 out of 30 Nobel Prizes in physics were given to 25 teams, not 25 single individual physicists. That implies that co-work, interaction, is a lot more important than inspiration that comes out of flesh. So scientific interactions are the major source of inspiration and great idea, I think.
Can I invite the other two panelists to make a short contribution? Professor Gupta.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is about the ideas which we talked about in formal system. But there are a lot of good ideas in the informal system. The farmers, the artisans, the mechanics on the roadside, and they are no less capable of generating ideas. And they don't have a network on the line, in other words, their internet. They have networks, their social networks, but very often when they have to develop a new idea or a new innovation, they try to hide it because very often the society around them ridicules the idea of breaking out from the mold. So many of them have to be secretive about their pursuit because they don't want to invite censor, they don't want to invite criticism, they don't want to invite censor. So therefore, good ideas may come from isolated minds, passionate about solving a problem, not only their own, but sometimes that of others. So what I call as empathetic innovations, when people internalize the pain of others. Good ideas also come when people find that the only way they can get through this situation is by solving it. And good ideas also come from children. In fact, I call it inverted model of innovation. Children invent, engineers fabricate, companies commercialize. And that's happening at a very large scale in our country. A lot of young ideas. Last year, the award we gave to the youngest child was class 1 for an innovation. So good ideas can come from anywhere, not just from the labs, not just from the teams, and not just from the big institutions.
Thank you very much. And finally?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Anil there that good ideas come from anywhere. And I think being an organization which is mostly field-based, grassroots-based, we see ideas coming mostly from our field. And exactly what he said, that from human interaction. But it's also important that we actually recognize what these innovations are. Because in any good organization, if the innovators are not recognized, then they would leave the organization. So it's also important we define what innovations are. We're talking about inventions, our Archimedes example. We're talking about Steve Jobs, which is more consumer product friendly. But the kind of work we do in the public sector, the NGO sector does, it's mostly about social innovations, about social entrepreneurs do. Basically having a deep awareness of a social problem and becoming very effective on coming up with a solution to the problem. And that's innovation. So, and that kind of innovation, smaller tweaking around of a problem or a solution is happening every day, in our organization, coming from all around. But it's important to create a space as well so that, particularly larger organizations, so that innovators from all around the corners of the country, they also feel that they are being recognized, they're being heard, and there's a process that being managed to potentially scale up some of these innovations.
Thank you. We've had a range of views from the panel about where good ideas come from, and I think most people, well, I'm an academic, and academics spend their life sitting on the fence. And so the safe answer is both. That good ideas come from individuals working alone, often in complete isolation, and they also come from teams of people working and bouncing ideas off each other. But let me ask the audience a question. In your own experience, the really good ideas which have impacted upon your life, just think about that for the moment, a single innovation which has impacted most upon your life. Did it come from a single individual, or did it come as a result of often many years of dedicated work by a team of people developing those ideas? Where sort of instinctively do you sit between those two extremes? Let's have a quick show of hands. Those people who feel that ideas come from individuals mainly. The really exciting things that have impacted upon you have come from an individual. And those people who think that the exciting and things that have impacted upon them have come from groups and teams working over time. I think you're pretty well split 50-50, which is like the panel is, and like everybody else, we're all sitting on the fence. The answer is, of course, both.